My name is Sabne Raznik. You have found the channel here on YouTube where I do what I call mini readings, which means it's just usually just one poem by one of my works or somebody else's. Depends on what my mood is or if I've got some of my own work that I'm promoting. I'm trying to get a whole library here on this channel to serve as a kind of introduction to world poetry. I know, grandiose, but here we are. And I've had this channel since 2011. 2011. So you can go back through, see what you can find. I usually post a video once a month, sometime around the 20th. And lots of diverse topics. I'm filming this one on the 25th of February. I don't know when I'll actually upload it because, I usually film in blocks and then upload over time. That way I'm able to keep the schedule regular despite the fact that I'm disabled and have chronic health issues and da 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 da. But, so a lot of times I'll film and not upload that particular video, sometimes for several months. And that's why sometimes you will see several videos where I'm wearing the same thing. It's because I filmed them in the same day and then put them up later. Um, and then, sometimes you'll see me not do that because sometimes I don't film in blocks. It depends. It depends on how I'm feeling and what's going on that particular day. Like today, for instance, I happened to get ready an hour early for a doctor's appointment, so I'm just going to make one video since it was like, well, I've got an hour to kill and I have makeup on. Let's use that makeup. But I only have an hour, so I can't film a whole block of videos, right? Well, I discovered recently that I don't think I've put any Wendell Berry on this channel, which, given that he's a Kentucky poet and all that, seems kind of, and I'm a Kentucky gal, seems kind of something I need to remedy. So we're going to, and I thought that I had a book of Wendell Berry's poems in my house, but I haven't been able to find it. So we're going to I found one online. I'm going to read. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, I lost my dog for a second, but she's laying right behind me. Anyway, so today we're going to do Wendell Berry. Wendell Berry is kind of well, he's, wow, Wendell Berry, giant, right? Poetic giant in as far as Kentucky goes. And he's an environmentalist. He's a farmer. And, not Eastern Kentucky. I'm not exactly sure where he lives, to be honest. I used to know, but now I don't. I don't think he's in Eastern Kentucky because you can't really farm in Eastern Kentucky. You can do subsistence farming, which is farming just enough to feed the family that lives in the house, right? And you may make it through the winter and you may not. Because Eastern Kentucky is all mountains, right? It's not really a good place to farm. But so if seeing that he's a farmer, he probably lives further west, where it's flatter, where the horses are, and you do have better farmland and all of that. But he's very much an environmentalist, and I kind of agree with some of his thinking as far as the only way that we're going to be able to save this planet is to learn to live with it instead of on it. Not a big fan of, even though I love animals and all that, I'm really not a big fan of animal activists because a lot of times animal activists cause more harm than good, because they're extremists, really, and they don't really know as much as they think they do about animals and stuff. And when they push their agendas, well, for instance, okay, in the 70s, if you've watched the movie Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken about the girl who would ride diving horses, that was based on a true story. Once upon a time, they did really dive horses, and the thing of with that was, uh, the horses didn't really get hurt that much. It was the people who rode them that did. Because the story is based around a girl who would ride diving horses and she hit the water with her eyes open, so she went blind, right? And then she continued to dive horses even after she went blind. An inspirational story, right? Um, and and it's a true story that that woman was a real woman and continued to dive horses for years up until they outlawed the practice of diving horses, which happened in the 70s. And the reason why they outlawed the practice of diving horses is because the animal activists decided it was cruel, even though the horses really didn't get hurt that much, just the people who rode them. And what happened though, whenever they finally succeeded in outlawing this practice of diving horses? Well, they didn't really have a plan as to what was going to happen to the horses when they didn't have a job anymore. So they rounded up the horses. They took them to the pool where they used to dive into, right? And then they shot them and killed them because they didn't have a job anymore and there was no one to feed them anymore. There was no money to feed them anymore because there was no income coming in. So they rounded up and shot them. You see what I mean? Animal activists don't really think this through. And it's the same thing with the animal activists that are all like, end horse racing is cruel. And I agree that the claiming levels are cruel because I consider that like the foster care levels of horse racing because they tend to change owners and that's the whole point of claiming is to change owners and trainers quickly. So that's where the abuse tends to happen the most. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in the higher levels like the Kentucky Derby and the Triple Crown races and stuff because it does. There's all that controversy around the trainer Bob Baffert, who happens to have trained the last two Triple Crown winners, because he got caught with all those drugging the horses violations. It does happen in the higher levels too, but it's more likely to happen in the claiming levels because they change owners and trainers, and their human team around them changes so often. So I'm not saying that abuse doesn't happen in horse racing. It happens a lot less now than it did 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago because of animal activists. They have their place. They have their place in horse racing. They keep things balanced. But they cannot be allowed to win completely, though. They cannot be allowed to ban the sport in its entirety because if they did, the thoroughbred breed would cease to exist completely. And honestly, they're not thinking ahead in terms of what will happen to these horses if they completely succeed. They're not thinking that far ahead. And you can see what's going to happen if they do succeed when you see what's happening in California. Because horse racing in California is starting to collapse. They have already ended horse racing in the northern part of the state completely, and now it only exists in the southern part of the state with Del Mar and Santa Anita. But the northern racetracks, like the fairgrounds and stuff, have already ceased racing completely as of 2025. That racing in the northern part of California has completely ceased. What happened to all the horses that used to race in Northern California? It has become such a crisis that what used to be considered definite red flags, that thoroughbred people who bought thoroughbreds would be like, well, that's definitely a scam. Avoid that. That's a red flag. Don't buy those horses. Somebody's scamming you. That's fraudulent. People are now taking sellers like those seriously because it is happening that you have these high bloodline horses being sold like cattle. And I'm not meaning any disrespect to cattle because I understand that's a legitimate business too. I have family members that have a cattle farm. It's a small operation, but so I understand how that works too. But so I don't mean any disrespect to that, um, but I mean they're and the government is actually literally giving away land, just like during the Manifest Destiny phase of going out west. They are literally giving away land out west to people as long as they will agree to turn it into a horse sanctuary, a horse rescue. Because these horses have nowhere to go, and their only option then is to be put on track because it's illegal to slaughter horses in the U.S. So they ship them to Mexico to do it. And that's what they are doing to these horses because nobody thought it through to what would happen to these horses when they closed down these tracks. So when these animal activists are saying horse racing is abuse, we have to shut it down completely, they're not thinking it all the way through as to having alternatives to where these horses can go and what their purpose in lives will be when the tracks are gone. And that is true across all aspects of animal activism. Their hearts are in the right place, but they do not think it through all the way. And so, I mean, like I said, I love animals, and animal activists have their place and all of that because they do keep things balanced. They do make positive changes in this sports or whatever that they fight against, but they cannot be allowed to win their causes completely because they don't think it all the way through. And they don't have anywhere for these animals to go. And if they do win their cause completely, it results in massive death. What will happen if they win their cause completely? I'm just using horse racing as an example, but it's true across everything. If they win their cause completely with horse racing, it will result in the biggest slaughter of horses since the invention of the automobile. And that's a fact. They'll just ship them to Mexico because it'll be the farms that breed them, the farms that take care of them and give them a place to go after they retire, the stud farms and the ones that make sure, the ones that don't go to stud, that go into second careers. Maybe they go into show jumping or become trail ride horses or at state parks or whatever their second careers are, that make sure they go into second careers, that they won't be able to afford to feed them and retrain them or whatever is required to get them into their stud career or their second career. They won't be able to afford to feed them. And nobody is thinking about what's going to happen to them after that. Just like they didn't think about it when they banned the sport of diving horses. And so what did they do? They took them to the pool where they used to dive and shot them. See, they don't think about this. And then when racing collapsed in northern California, and they've got these horses with bloodlines that go back to man o' war and go back to extremely famous thoroughbred British thoroughbred horses from the 1800s, and there's nothing for them to do now. They're sending as many of them as they can back to Kentucky, but Kentucky can only take so many. And the rest of them, it's like, what do they do then? you know. And as many of the jockeys and trainers and owners as can are coming back to Kentucky to try to get jobs, but Kentucky can only absorb so many. You know, it's really really sad. So me and Wendell Berry, and I mean we are all about the environmental causes, but it's like you have to think and all about animals and stuff, but it's like you have to think it all the way through, right? And the only way we're going to save this planet and every creature on it, because every creature on it is our brother and our sister, our brother horse and our sister cow and our brother raccoon and our sister eagle. The only way that we're going to save ourselves and everybody else on this planet is to learn to live with it instead of on it again. And a lot of that will have to be learning to give up what we've come to view as necessities that are actually comforts. We will have to learn to live like we did before electricity and before, you know, or find other ways to do these things. Learn how to wash clothes a different way, you know. Go back to some of the old ways of doing it. Was it harder work? Yes. Sometimes. But it was cleaner. The world was clean. In my lifetime, this all relates to Wendell Berry, okay? You may think I'm chatty Cathy-ing about nothing, but it all relates to Wendell Berry. In my lifetime, I'm going to call it, where I live, we call it strip mining, okay? This is Eastern Kentucky stuff, Appalachian stuff. Where I live, we call it strip mining. For the rest of you, it's mountaintop removal, where they will blast the top of a mountain off, sometimes as much or more than 600 feet down, to get to coal underneath, releasing as much as 5 Hiroshima bombs a day during the heyday of it, strip mining, which was like the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. It's slowing down now, but it's still going on. Eastern Kentucky took the brunt of that. West Virginia is the second most, and then Virginia and Tennessee. I remember when I was a child, there were places you could go and just stick a bucket under the water and drink. And you used to be able to go out and eat icicles. You could eat snow off the ground. And it was clean. Wouldn't hurt you at all. Now wouldn't dare do that. You can't even drink out of your own well because that water is contaminated. So everybody's signed up on city water, and you still can't really trust the city water. Half the time I drink the city water and I still get sick from it. But it's the best we got, right? And we just went through this is like a week out from our 2025 annual spring floods, and this year they were exceptionally fierce. Flooded 4 feet below the 1977 level, and that was before they put in all the dams and the flood walls and the all of that. So it was bad. They declared it across the entire state a national emergency or something, and we were without water for a while. It completely destroyed the whole county's city water system, and they've had to go through and walk the lines line by line to fix it. We've got water now, but it's still not drinkable. But we do have water. We just have to boil it before we can do anything with it. We're fortunate in that way. There's still parts of the county that still don't have water, but because they're having to walk the lines and fix them, you know. And it's a big county. It's the biggest county in the state. So, and we were the hardest hit of the state, and the whole state flooded. And it happens every year, but not as bad. Not as bad. This was the biggest flood that we have had since they put in the dams and everything that were supposed to stop 77 from ever happening again. And it was nearly 77. So, but yeah, it's like, but I remember when I was a kid, you used to be able to just go out and just drink from the water anywhere. Well, just about anywhere. And in my lifetime, the water has been, from the strip mining, has been contaminated. Sometime, I mean, there are creeks that run orange and white and weird colors constantly, and you can just see from looking at it that nothing is drinking out of that. You know what I mean? And it's sad to see that happen in your own lifetime. And that's all from the lie that these conveniences, so-called conveniences that you get from living in a city, are better than living the way we used to live when it was so-called harder to live, but better for everybody all around, you know. It may have been harder to live, but it was better for everybody, better for us, better for the animals, better for the earth. And maybe we need to go back to that. And Wendell Berry is one of those people that agree with that, you know. We need to go back to that. This is his poem. I'm going to run out of time to talk if I keep talking. And the reason why the screen just went dark and my face just went dark is because I prefer to use dark mode on my computer. And so the screen I'm reading from is dark. But anyway, the poem I'm going to read is called September 2nd. And I'm not sure what book this is from. The site I'm getting it from doesn't tell me. But I got it from a site called allpoetry.com. And I will put all that in the description in case you're interested in finding it. I try to always cite my sources in some way in the description box. Excuse me. Sorry about that. But this is September 2nd by Wendell Berry. In the evening there were flocks of nighthawks passing southward over the valley. The tall sunflowers stood, burning on their stalks to cold seed by the still river. And high up the birds rose into sight against the darkening clouds. They tossed themselves among the fading landscapes of the sky like rags, as in abandonment to the summons their blood knew. And in my mind, where had stood a garden straining to the light, there grew an acceptance of decline. Having worked, I would sleep, my leaves all dissolved in flight. Him and Seamus Heaney they're both poets of the earth in different ways, but they also have a way with words that is just like, another poet that is like one of my favorite poets who also has an amazing way with words. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name because I've only ever read it. Paul Celan. Put me right if I'm pronouncing it. It might be a hard C for all I know. But poet of the Holocaust. He was like, I don't know, he was a child in Auschwitz. But one of my favorite poets, and of course I read his poems in English because I know a little bit of German, but I don't know it well enough to read poetry in it. That's a whole different thing. And his gift is that he was a master of puns, which doesn't translate well into English. And so I have to rely heavily on reading the editor's notes when I read his poems. I've been thinking about reading his poems again, given what's going on right now, and the fear around it. Mostly just the fear in the zeitgeist right now. I've been trying to avoid the news. I told myself, in December, that I was not going to read the news at all. I was just I even thought about completely, deleting my news app, but It wouldn't matter if I did, because unlike the last 4 years before that, for some reason, even YouTube is pushing news on me now, and I never saw news on YouTube before. So it's like I don't. It's not like I go looking for it. It seems to find me. Um, it's like, okay, this is just an interesting moment in time, I guess. I think it's a good time to read Paul again. Anyway, but he's an amazing poet in a different way, not of the earth, but um, him and Anna Akhmatova are of a kind, and then Wendell and Seamus Heaney are of a kind. Is probably a way to put it. Yeah, different but of a kind at the same time. You know, I don't know how else to say what I'm trying to say there. But if you read Wendell and Seamus Heaney, you'll see what I mean. And if you read Anna Akhmatova and Paul Celan, you'll see what I mean. They are not the same as each other, but of a kind at the same time. But anyway, I need to get off here, so because I need to head off to the doctor. Time to go see my doctor. It's just a visit to make sure I get um, the meds I need. Yeah, you know how you get your prescriptions, but you have to go to the doctor like ever so often to keep them going. It's one of those visits, and but this time I get most of my medicines from my local doctor. But this particular doctor, I've got to go all the way like 33 miles down the road to see him. And I was supposed to see him last week, but like I think it was like 2 days before was the big flood, and the hospital there, because the closest hospital to me is there, 33 miles down the road, which is like a good hour from here. Depending on the state of the roads, it can be longer. And in the summer, there's always road work between here and there, so it can be a lot longer. But anyway, the floods, it was like, for one thing, there was like all this flooding and mudslides and stuff between here and there, and we couldn't have got there if we wanted to. And for another, the hospital was canceling appointments because not everything was open, because they were affected by the flood too. So they rescheduled my appointment for today. So, and that town has got their water back, and they're no longer on a boil water advisory like I am. So because they were the first ones to get everything back, and then the rest of the county, some of us have got our water back. We were fortunate to be one of the first people to get our water back, but the rest of the county is still on a boil water advisory for further notice, which made getting ready for the doctor even harder than it normally is. Because it takes me forever to get dressed because of my disability, but then now I had to like boil water and stuff before I could brush my teeth, so it made it even harder. And so I was like, well, I got to get up even earlier. But we made it. Or at least we will if I don't talk too long. And I will see you guys on the next video. And I hope everybody is safe. And I wish good things, all good things, and only good things for everybody. Okay? And I'll see you in the next video. Don't know when this one will go up. I've got like 4 other videos already filmed and ready to go up. So, whichever order I upload them in. And I will see you soon. Okay? Poetry on another day. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you totally enjoy the Poésie Joie, and hopefully learn something whenever I chat around the poem. And Dona Dago Hai, till we meet again. Bye.